Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week I have something pretty cool and hard to come by on the bench that is broken and needs to get repaired. So this is the Sharp Famicom Titler. So this is a very rare version of the Famicom, which is also known as the NES in North America. And what it basically does is it has two functions. On the right-hand side over here, it works like a normal Famicom, so it'll play Super Mario Brothers and Mario 3 and all the other Nintendo games. But what it does here on the left side is pretty unique. So it's basically a genlock device where you can take video inputs. They can be S-video or composite video. They can be gameplay footage, or they can be really whatever you want them to be. And you can overlay text and graphics on top of that. So you could use this for a variety of different things. Like you could take your home movies and overlay text and whatever on top of it. Or like I said, you could overlay text and stuff on top of your gameplay footage. So this was sold commercially so the public could buy this, but I think it was also potentially used by video game companies as well, because you could totally take gameplay footage and overlay text and use that for advertisements, for example. Just flip it around real quick and show you how it looks on the back, because there's a couple of cool, unique things about it. So, unlike a traditional Famicom or NES, those only output composite video. So that would be like right here. So composite video and mono sound. This thing, on the other hand, also has S-video in and out. So this is the output, this is the input, and then this is the composite video input. So all that stuff is for the titler function. So yeah, it's a really cool piece of console history, and unfortunately this one does not work. So I'll show you what it's doing in a minute, but what we're gonna do today is take it apart, have a look at what it does, what the problem is, and hopefully we can get this thing fixed. Okay, so for starters, let me just show you what this thing is doing. So right over here, this red button is power, and I don't have audio connected because right now I don't actually care. I just want to show you the problem. So right now I'm going to hit the power button. Now it's turned on, and so what you get is a white screen, and it will do this no matter what. You can have, cleaned, confirmed good games, test them, and it will just show a white screen no matter what. So the owner of this console was using a non-official power supply, and I have a feeling that that power supply was bad, maybe not producing the right voltages, and as a result, fried this thing, because it was working and then it stopped working. So yeah, one thing that is a kind of recent development which will allow me to better work on this thing is I actually purchased my own. So I have my own Sharp Famicom Titler that fully works. So what I can do with that is actually take this thing apart and swap around parts, and that should help me to narrow down the problem. So what I'm going to do now is just flip this thing over, remove the screws, and then open it up, and we can have a better look at what's inside. Okay, I've gone ahead and removed the top shell of the console, and there's really nothing complicated there. You just have a bunch of Phillips screws to remove, but when you do remove it, you have to be extra careful with the front, because there is this small little flex cable right here, and this is for, I'll just flip it over and show it to you really quick. It's for this pad, and you use this pad with a stylus to create letters for the overlays. So you can use English letters, or you can use kanji, I believe, and it will recognize that and draw it on the screen. So that's what this thing is for. And on the opposite side, here's the flex cable for that device. So that's connected to the board, and I'll show you where in a few minutes. And then this harness here is also connected, and that's just for this bank of switches. And again, this is for controlling the titler functions, and so you can see all of those switches right over here. Okay, so when you open it up, you just got to kind of carefully remove that, and I didn't film that, but again, that's extremely simple. And the area where that connects is actually right over here. So the buttons connect to this harness, so you just pull it out. And with this, the flex cable, it actually goes into this little connector right here. So you just kind of pull these two tabs upward, and then it comes right out. So as you can see, the titler consists of 3 different boards. So this large board here, I'm gonna just call the titler board itself, because it has power regulation over here, where it takes 14 volts and 7.5 volts. and then it regulates that power down. And then all of this, I believe, is related to how the titler actually functions. There's only 3 chips on it, 4 chips rather, so there's really not that much on it. Right over here, this is the Famicom board, and this has an appearance very similar to the one that's used in the Sharp Twin Famicom. That's a version of the Famicom where you have a disk system and a Famicom all built into one single unit. And I've definitely covered that before on the channel. So this plastic thing here, this is like the eject mechanism. So you like push a button here and it ejects your cartridges. It sends them flying. It's actually really, really hilarious. And this works exactly like it does on the Super Nintendo and on the Sharp Twin Famicom. So it has this little bar, and you just pull that out, and then you just slide this thing out of the way. And now we can take a better look at the console itself. So as you would imagine, it has a CPU, and this is the same CPU that you would find in a regular Famicom or in a North American NES. There's absolutely nothing interesting or special about that chip. But here is the picture processing unit, or PPU, and that is an incredibly interesting chip. This is a one-of-a-kind built only for this console. So unlike the normal PPU in a Nintendo, this PPU is capable of generating RGB. And so it makes RGB, but that isn't displayed. The RGB is then turned into S-video, and then that is sent out on the out port over there. What's also really cool about this chip is that it has a unique color palette. So it's a color palette that is totally unlike any other. It's not the same as the arcade Nintendo PPUs, which do also make RGB, but they have a different kind of color palette. This one looks a lot better, in my opinion, compared to the arcade color palette. Okay, so that's one thing to talk about. Now, there are chips on here that I can recognize that are identical to the kinds that you would see on a regular Nintendo or Famicom. Like, for example, I know like these 2 chips I believe are common on a Famicom. Those are discrete logic chips. You can't really see them with the cart slot in the way. These are needed for the controllers. There's a few other things I don't recognize, including this custom Sharp chip over here. So I don't entirely know all of the functionality. Now, you can't really see it because of the cart slot. Oh, maybe there we go. I'm just going to angle it up a bit. But right over here, you've got 2 6116 RAM chips. These are for the video from the PPU, and also one for the CPU. So that's exactly the same as a normal Famicom. This stuff all up here, though, is not normal at all. The fact that there's a battery and all this. So I don't know this for sure, but what I think all of this is the program for running the titler. So I think this is a PRG and CHR ROM, just like you would get in a video game cart. You also have a mapper chip, so it's the MMC1B1. You have this custom Sharp chip, which again I have no clue what it does, and you have a battery, and I believe this is for backing up settings. So it's a really cool board because it's like a board that has a cartridge built into it up here, and then a Famicom all the way down here. Now, you'll see there's like this toggle switch over here. This toggles the console between titler mode and regular Famicom mode. When it's down like this, it's in Famicom mode, and you can play games. When the shell is assembled, this actually, when you flip it up like this, something actually physically obstructs the flaps on the cart. So you actually cannot insert a game when it's in this titler mode. And I think when this switch is flipped, then the Famicom side is running the quote-unquote game from over here, which is the titler software. Really cool. I mean, like I said, I've never seen anything like this before, aside from in the titler. So then there's this third board down here. Now, some of this I kind of understand, and some of this I definitely do not. So I think a fair amount of this is related to that stylus, that character identification feature that the titler has. So you can see that the stylus pad plugs in over here, and also the control buttons from the titler plug in over here. There's a fair amount of discrete logic, so those are just common chips that you could get anywhere. I don't see anything proprietary on here. And then you also have the controller pads right here. So this is player 1, this is player 2. Oh, let me just scoot over a bit. Player 1, player 2. Then you also have the expansion port right over here, and this is just like any other Famicom. So yeah, that's essentially what we've got here with the titler. So what I'm going to do now is, since I have a fully working titler, that saves me a lot of trouble with trying to diagnose this thing. First thing I'm going to do is just get out my multimeter, and I want to power on the titler and just make sure that I'm getting good voltages on the Famicom side of things. And so if I'm getting 5 volts or something very close to 5 volts here, then that's good. That tells me that the power regulation should be working, at least on the Famicom side, and probably very likely on the titler side. So if that's good, then what I'm going to do next is try to swap boards. So I'll either take out the titler board on this side and swap it with my working one, or I will take this Famicom board and swap it in with my working one, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and film just a quick test where I power this thing on, and we're going to just see if I get 5 volts on the Famicom board. So there's really not too much to do in order to do that. First thing I've got to do is just get out the multimeter, and I got to set it to this mode right here. This is the DC voltage mode, and then I've got my leads plugged in. So I have my black lead for ground, and I have this lead for voltage right here, the red one. And so really all we've got to do is I'll try to set this up. But you have to put the black lead on a known ground point, and then you have to put the red lead where there's a source of 5 volts, and then see basically what you get. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to just set this up here on ground. I believe this one here is, this pin right here is ground on the PPU. So let me turn on the console. And again, we don't need a game for this. We're just trying to see. And yeah, we have a solid 4.8 volts or almost 4.9 volts. So that tells me that we're getting a good power regulation to the Famicom. And I'm not so surprised about that. I mean, I was kind of hopeful that maybe the bad power supply kind of killed something in the power generation circuit, and maybe like the voltage regulator died or some of these caps died. But visually, the capacitors look good, and I don't think, obviously, the regulator is working because we are getting a good solid 5 volts. Okay, so now that I know that, the next thing I want to do is swap boards. So I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this Famicom board and just remove all the wiring harnesses down here on the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and swap it into my good working system and see what happens. All right, so I went ahead and swapped out the Famicom motherboard into my known good working titler. So what I'm hoping to do here is basically see what it does. So if everything works normally, then that's actually very useful information. That tells me that the problem is likely confined to this board right here. Or maybe this board, but I honestly don't think so. If I had to guess that there was a fault, it's going to be either with the titler board here or with the Famicom board. But let's go ahead, pop it in, and see if it turns on. All right, so it does turn on, and we're getting a white screen. So yeah, that is actually extremely useful information because I know this works, I know this works. This is the board from the broken machine, and suddenly now we're getting the exact same symptoms that we were getting on the broken machine. So that's good. That tells me that I need to focus my energy over here. So let's go ahead and have a look at it and keep trying to see if we can solve this thing. All right, so I pulled the broken board out of my working unit, and I just wanted to update a few things. So I was doing some searching, and I was actually wrong about what these two chips are. So these are actually RAM as well. I thought they were the character ROM and program ROM for the titler software, but no, they are actually RAM. So maybe all of the titler software is hiding within this chip. Not entirely sure. But yeah, this extra RAM still probably has something to do with the titler functionality. I don't believe it's related to the Famicom because the Famicom only needs these two chips right over here. All right, but anyway, everything is out now. And so the question is, We know there's a problem on this board, but we don't know exactly where that problem is. So at this point, like, I'm gonna kind of rely on my experience with repairing Nintendos and Famicoms, of which I've repaired, I don't even know how many, like an obscene amount of them. And in my experience, when they fail, the things that tend to fail are the custom chips, so either the CPU or the PPU. Sometimes the RAM also fails as well. So either the video RAM or the RAM for the CPU fails. Sometimes it's a combination of those 4 chips, but it is super, super rare to see anything else fail. So the discrete logic, for example, occasionally will go bad, but it certainly wouldn't cause the system to completely choke. It's usually a failure of one of those 4 chips. So what I'm going to do, and again, this isn't for any specific reason exactly, but the fact that I see some color on the screen makes me hope that this like unobtainium PPU is actually okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the CPU right here. So I'm going to go ahead and desolder this CPU. If this is dead, I honestly do not care because this chip is replaceable with a CPU from a normal Famicom or even from a North American Nintendo. So let's go ahead, pull this thing out, and I'm going to test it in a separate console. All right, so I've gone ahead and taken the CPU outside of the titler, and I've installed it here into this console. So this is an OpenTendo top loader, and so basically this is a modern recreation of the original NES top loader. I built this for myself quite a long time ago, and the reason why I built it is because I have a socket installed where every single chip is located. So that allows me to very easily remove chips and test them and make sure that they're working correctly. So I've got this thing plugged in to RF, just because like this top loader is basically stock. There's no mods to it. It's just a standard top loader. And I've gone ahead and pulled out my good working CPU, which is right over here. And I have installed the one from the titler right here. So if we've got a working, console, then I know the CPU is fine and I can move on to something else. But it's a very common chip to fail. This and the PPU are common to fail. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we're getting a gray screen. So this is very, very similar to the titler. So yeah, okay, that tells me that this CPU is a goner. So let me go ahead now and just swap it out with another CPU. This is the one I'm going to use for the donor. Okay, so let's see what happens now. All right, and there we go. So I literally did nothing, other than swap out that one chip, and now we have a working top loader again. So this tells me I have a good donor chip. So I'm gonna go ahead and solder this one directly into the titler, and then let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna get ready to put the CPU back into the motherboard, but I just wanted to show you a few things really quick. One was that it was actually really easy to pull out. So I just used my desoldering gun to, clear out all the vias, and then I used a hot air gun just to help to loosen up the remaining little bits of solder that were holding it in place. I unfortunately lost that footage. I apologize for that, but it's something I've shown on the channel on many other occasions with other Nintendo videos. But yeah, you can see it came out really clean. The vias are all looking great. I just wanted to show you the other side of the board. So when I opened this console up, I saw this complete madness, and I was like, what the hell is this? But it turns out that this is actually from the factory. So these are little bodges that were added from the factory, I guess, to correct some mistakes on the board. And my console that 100% works has the exact same weirdness going on there. So this is actually from the factory. So I didn't need to touch or change any of these various bodges except for one. So there is this one little resistor that goes between this pin and this little pad on the motherboard, and so I had to lift this leg off in order to remove the CPU. But now that it's done, I'm gonna reattach the CPU and reconnect that little bodge. The other thing that I have to say is that I would prefer to put a socket in here so that I don't have to, basically put the donor in and permanently solder it into place. But what I realized is that if I do in fact add a socket, it makes everything too tall, and that eject latch, that big plastic eject latch, it actually sits right here over the CPU and PPU. So it would no longer fit if I installed a socket. So because of those space limitations, I'm going to actually just solder the CPU directly into the board. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, so here's the moment of truth. I've gone ahead and reassembled the console for the most part. We've got the new CPU installed right here. You'll notice it's also a G revision. It's the same as the one that I pulled out. And I mean, I don't think that matters, but I wanted to keep everything as kind of original as I possibly could here. I've got S-Video plugged in. This time I have audio plugged in too, in case we're lucky and it works. And I'm really hoping not. I mean, I'm really hoping it is. Sorry. So yeah, let's just do this. Let's get this going. All right, I'm gonna print you up to the screen here. Yeah! Oh my God. Oh, that's just beautiful. Okay, so the power supply, the bad power supply just killed the CPU, and it seems like nothing else is bad here. Let's just start the game really quick and see if we've got audio. I assume we do. Okay, so I'm an idiot. Sound is totally working, and it's because this volume wheel was dialed all the way in the other direction. The other thing too I have learned is that if this switch is not in the correct orientation, which is towards the front, the controls won't necessarily work right away. So when I first got it powered on, I had no controls working and no audio, but I already knew about the switch, but I had completely forgotten about the potentiometer right here. So yeah, it's all working now. So let me just give you a quick, visual of how the console looks. So this is S-Video going into a very cheap scaler, but you can already tell that it's incredibly crisp. And if you look at Mario, you can tell that his outfit is maybe a little redder than it normally is. Normally it's not quite so red. I think it's usually a little bit more like brownish. And so this is because of the unique color palette that is used by the titler. I would argue it's definitely better than the one used by the arcade, because the arcade, it's kind of yellowish. Everything is a little too yellow, but this to me looks pretty good. Let me go ahead and put in another game too. Just put in, got Twinbee right here, just power it on real quick. Now, if I just start this up, and if you take a look at the blues, you'll notice that, yeah, here you can see it. Hopefully this is coming through on camera, but there is a little bit of jail bars from the RGB on this console. So the NES RGB is definitely still, in my opinion, better than this, in the sense that the colors are accurate to your typical Japanese or North American NES, and you don't get jail bars like you do with this. But all that being said, this is still a super, super cool console. So let me go ahead and put it back together, and I'm gonna, put together a little demonstration for you guys. Okay, so now that I got this thing working, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a demonstration into what it can do. There's also other videos out there that show how the titler works, and I'll put a link in the description for that if you guys are curious, because this was more about repairing it, not so much about demonstrating it. But yeah, since I have it here and this thing is super cool and rare, I thought I'd show you a little bit more about what it does. So, as I told you before, when it's in Famicom mode, you can just put a game in and it'll play games just like any other Famicom. There's nothing unique or special about that. It works 100% the same as a regular Famicom. But what we can also do is put this thing into titler mode. So for that, we're gonna flip this switch up, and when this switch is up, you can see you actually can't open the cartridge slot, so it prevents you from putting games in. So now over here on the left, you see I have a half disassembled Sega Genesis. This is here just to demonstrate how the titler works. So I actually have it turned on, and it's actually running right now. And so you can see it's got the AV cable here, and the AV cable is actually connected to the titler. It's going into the composite input and the mono audio input. So right now that Genesis is playing, but of course it's playing to nothing. It's just getting fed into the titler, and the titler is turned off. So let me go ahead and put you on the screen here, and let's just turn on the titler. And so when you turn it on normally, you get this Sharp Famicom Titler screen here. So now if I just hit a button, it gets me into this main menu right here. And unfortunately, since I don't really know Japanese, I can't navigate this very well, but I'm going to do my best. So the first thing I'm going to do is come back here to the main control panel, and then there's this superimposition switch here. So if I flip this to on, now what you can do is you can actually see the Sega Genesis, and I can even add in the Genesis audio. So there we go. So now you can see the Genesis audio, I'm sorry, see the Genesis video, you can hear the Genesis, and it's being overlaid with the titler window here. So now you can overlay stuff on top of the gameplay footage. So if I go over here, for example, and I know this is a little bit late because I'm filming this in January, but you can take a Merry Christmas graphic and combine it with your gameplay footage. And yeah, the stylus that came with this console and this little graph pad here allowed you to combine custom text with your gameplay footage, or with really any composite or S-video source that was fed into this thing. So yeah, so it was definitely something for like the home amateur video hobbyist, where you could make custom videos and overlay stuff onto them. But you know, a video game company could also presumably use something like this too, because you could record gameplay footage and then overlay text and make, you know, say a commercial, for example, and then just record that out of the titler, and then you've got your copy for your commercial. But yeah, so that's just a very, very simple overview of the titler. Again, there's stuff about this I don't understand. It's really hindered by the fact that I don't read Japanese. I do know up here that these 5 buttons are like a memory bank, so you can store preset things onto here and then show them as the gameplay footage is progressing. But yeah, again, I don't fully understand all this, and it's really just impaired, you know, because I don't speak Japanese. But yeah, it's a really cool and rare piece of Nintendo history. I'm super happy that I got this thing working, and yeah, that's about it for this week's video. So if you guys like this kind of content, then consider subscribing. I try to have videos out, you know, whenever I can, hopefully bi-weekly or weekly. And then of course, if you have a console that you need repaired or modified, you can always contact me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right, guys, that's it for this week's video. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.